Okay, so Richard Feynman talking about this energy in space, and Don Smith talking about the energy in electron pairs. Let's imagine that the sun makes electrons, right? And they make electrons in different sizes. There's small electrons and large electrons. These electrons come out of the sun, they come from the sun, and they pair up. They pair up, a large electron with a small electron. Okay? And they stay together, electron pairs. Now, these electrons are together, and we can use very, I'll call it subtle, we could also call it weak, magnetic fields to push these electron pairs apart. When you push them apart, you get amps, and they go this way, right? They go like this, and then when they come together, they go like this. That's volts. Amps, volts, amps, volts, right? So that's our amperage and our voltage coming from electron pairs. Now what I'm trying to understand is, I'm trying to understand how to, okay, so Don Smith tells us that we can use weak magnetic fields to push the electron pairs apart, and that gives us our current, right, our amperage, which kind of makes sense, right, because it's resisting being pushed apart, and amperage is resistance, so that really actually makes sense. When they come back together, we get voltage. Now what is voltage? I don't know what voltage is. I mean, it's a number. My battery is 151.2 volts, fully charged. But anyway, the meter is going to give us, it's going to tell us we got voltage, right? So we got our amps and our volts. But how do we, what I'm thinking is, how do we, I'm going to call it pressurize, but that's probably the wrong word, right? I think that's what our power lines do, they pressurize. I feel like our grid, our electric grid, is a free energy grid. I don't mean it's not costing money to maintain it. I just mean, look how many houses are powered with those little power lines. And then people say, well, it's because it's really high voltage or it's high potential. Okay, well, whatever that signal is, I think that's the same signal that Don Smith's talking about. Now, what kind of, now if we go back to Gerard Morin. Gerard Morin talked about power plants and what was at the power plant, right? And my understanding of what's at the power plant is a generator that's like an alternator, like a really big alternator, right? A really big alternator. There was a couple sleeping in there. They need a place to live, right? They need a home. There's, I lost my train of thought. Let me think of what I was just saying right now. everything before the corner because it's a blind corner. It may not help, but it also may help. So I always ding the bell, ding the horn. What was I saying? Amps and volts. Oh, the energy grid, the electrical grid. Yeah. So what I was originally thinking myself growing up is, how come the power lines are not like 4 feet thick? Right? If we just add up the current of we add up the watt hours of each home each home uses. To me, it looks like it's exceeding what the power plant can produce, right? Like it looks that way. I mean, it looks like it's exceeding what the power lines can transmit, right? That's what I'm thinking. Like it looks like it's exceeding that what the power lines transmit. Okay, that looks like trucks that trim the trees to me. I don't know if these guys trim the trees, but interesting. Is that a police car in the back? I don't know. I think it is. I think I can go right now. Okay, so that was nice. The police officer was going to close his door for me, but I didn't need it. It wasn't in the way. I waved to him. Okay, so what was I saying? Yeah, so it looks to me like if we add up the watt hours of every home, the kilowatts, whatever you want to call it, kilowatt hours of every home every home uses each day, or each minute, each second, it looks like it appears like it exceeds the capacity of these power lines to carry that much power, right? Because look how little they are. I mean, you could say those are big, but they're not. They're certainly not 4 feet thick, right? They're probably a few inches thick. I don't know how many inches, like what, 1 inch, 2 inch? So I had thought that myself, and then Gerard Morin said the same thing later. I was watching a video of his, and he said that, and I go, wait a second, I was thinking that before. Anyway, and it would make sense that at really high potential, if I call it that, if I use that word, there's less resistance, right? Think of Nikola Tesla, right? So when people say, oh, Tesla wanted to give the free energy to the world, well, my understanding is that those power lines are actually carrying a free energy signal. Morning. And you know, we pay for it, but that's the efficiency of that signal. It's very efficient. Now, I'm not exactly sure how every aspect of that works, but I'm just taking notes here. I'm just sharing notes, right, on what I've thought about. So, you know, Gerard Morin said, and he's not the only one, but I'll talk about him, because he has a lot of videos that talk about this. There's a lot of people talking about this, but I'll focus on Gerard for the moment. Gerard Morin talked about I lost my train of thought. Anyway, going back to Don Smith, it'll come back. My train of thought will come back. Don Smith, it's this idea of how do we use those electron pairs, if I say it this way, to pump energy into a battery, right? And this is teachers around the world, electrical and mechanical engineering students and professors, have teamed up and built like range extenders on electric vehicles, electric motorcycles, by adding just regular alternators, right? I don't recall how they wired the alternators. I don't know if they were running one alternator to each battery, or connected all the alternators in series and then connected all that total voltage to the battery. So I don't know, you know, I'm in the research phase. I'm researching this, and I do know that, like, it's very strange because if you just go on the internet or talk to people, like, I don't know, if you talk to people, some people will say there's no way to extend the range of an electric vehicle by adding alternators. But if you do the research, you're going to see that people have been doing this ever since the electric car was first came out, which was before the gas car. People have been charging the electric cars and adding range by adding range by putting different kind of, you know, alternators, generators. So this is well documented throughout history, right? But somehow people want to say, oh, well, I learned in school, right? So we go back. So the same teachers and the same, well, not the same teachers, but, you know, in school you can have some teachers and students who do the experiments and they succeed, but then you have other students that say it can't be done, it can't be done. And all the things that can't be done and have been done, it just keeps repeating itself throughout history, right? So people say, well, yeah, it can't be done until it can. That's one way of saying it. It's impossible until it's not impossible. So it's really important to use imagination, like Einstein said, and to remember what Richard Feynman and Don Smith said about energy and electron pairs, right? Now, I don't know if Richard Feynman talked about electron pairs, but he talked about energy. Don Smith talked about electron pairs. We're talking about energy. So, where do you think that energy is coming from? I think the electron pairs are pumping energy in from the Dirac sea, which is an endless supply of energy. Endless. Why is it endless? Because it's sustained. Energy is sustained throughout the whole universe. It's interconnected instantaneously. That's why. So how do we use electron pairs to charge a battery? Now, we're going to talk about John Bedini and Tom Bearden now. John Bedini... Actually, John Bedini was experimenting with what Richard Feynman called the flywheel. So when you think flywheel, you just think regular flywheel, right? You don't think it has any magnets or any coils on it. But my research and study indicate that Richard Feynman was experimenting with the same technology that John Bedini and Tom Bearden were experimenting with. Because John Bedini and Tom Bearden worked closely together, very close relationship, experimentally, theoretically, philosophically.